During a fishing trip in the Arctic, the crew spotted something odd, a polar bear swimming toward them. It wasn't near any large chunks of ice, which worried the crew. The bear kept trailing their boat, which was strange since polar bears usually keep to themselves and avoid humans. Realizing they couldn't just ignore it, the crew lowered a rescue boat to check things out, ready for whatever might happen, even if it got risky. The crew knew what they were getting into. Still, they figured the main boat was high enough for the bear not to reach them, which eased some of the tension. But it didn't take away all their nerves. There didn't seem to be any solid ice nearby that could hold the bear's weight. And honestly, they couldn't just let it drown either. As soon as the lifeboat touched the water, the bear let out a low growl and latched onto it with its powerful paws and sharp claws. "Well, good thing that thing doesn't pop," Richard, one of the crew, mumbled. A few others chuckled nervously at the comment. Captain Reynolds stepped closer to the edge, now face to face with the polar bear. The bear stood upright, lifting itself partly out of the water, and let out another, louder roar. The captain's forehead creased. "What's it doing?" he asked, but nobody answered. They were too focused, watching the bear from above, trying to make sense of it. The bear kept making sounds, not aggressive, but steady. It wasn't backing down. As the boat continued westward, the animal's behavior became more agitated. "Stop the ship," Captain Reynolds ordered. They halted quickly, and then, out of nowhere, the bear pushed off the raft and swam back the way they had come. Everyone stood still. Hadn't they just saved it? Why was it leaving? Maybe it had just needed a short break after swimming so far. Still, something didn't sit right with the captain. He stayed by the edge, watching carefully as most of the crew returned to work. Instead of swimming away, the bear paused. That caught Reynolds' attention. "What now?" he muttered, watching closely. The bear turned its head, looked directly at the ship, and let out a deep, clear roar before swimming back to the raft. Again it climbed on, rising to its hind legs. Was it hungry? Did it see them, or their fish, as food? If that was it, maybe they could spare a few from their catch. They'd already hit their quota, and if the bear was really desperate, a few fish wouldn't hurt. With that, Captain Reynolds headed toward the storage area. Reynolds made his way into the icebox, the name they'd given the chilly storage room where they kept all the fish they'd caught over the past few days. He grabbed a fairly large one, then headed back to the edge of the boat. He was sure the polar bear would still be waiting, judging by all the noise it was making. But when Captain Reynolds tossed the fish toward the bear, something surprising happened. The bear didn't react much. It glanced at the fish, gave it a sniff, and then stood back up on its hind legs, letting out another loud roar. Captain Reynolds frowned. If the bear wasn't hungry, then what did it want? It was frustrating. He genuinely wanted to help the incredible creature, but he also wasn't about to get any closer. He wasn't reckless. As the two stared each other down, the bear suddenly changed its approach. It began pawing at the side of the ship. At first, its claws made a scraping noise against the metal, mildly annoying if anything, but then the noise grew louder, like it was banging. What in the world was the animal trying to say? Captain Reynolds realized he had to get to the bottom of this. "Steward," he called out. One of his crew members stepped forward, eyeing the bear nervously, clearly not as fascinated as the captain was. "Yes, Captain?" "What do you need?" he asked, glancing between Reynolds and the bear, which was now just about 12 feet below them. "Get me the radio, or at least stay here and keep a close eye on the bear." "I need someone watching its behavior and reporting back," Captain Reynolds said. He watched Steward go pale. I'll get the radio, sir," he stammered, clearly shaken, before hurrying off quickly, likely worried the captain might change his mind. Reynolds stayed put, eyes locked on the bear as it moved back and forth on the raft. The animal slapped the water with its paw. Was it trying to point them somewhere? The captain couldn't make sense of it. He knew a bit about polar bears. He used to love reading about them as a kid, but he'd never heard of one acting quite like this. Thankfully, Stewart returned quickly, holding the radio just minutes after being sent off. It was a small but powerful device, one that had helped them many times before. They used it to contact nearby vessels for weather updates or emergencies, and right now, Reynolds hoped someone out there might have some insight into this strange situation. He clicked the radio on and leaned into the speaker. "This is Captain Reynolds from the Amberjack, in urgent need of expertise for a polar bear situation." "Over," he said clearly, hoping someone nearby, maybe with scientists on board, would pick up the call and offer guidance. His voice buzzed softly over the static as it traveled across the frozen Arctic. "This is the Amberjack, requesting assistance for a strange polar bear issue," he repeated. There was a slight edge to his voice, a quiet urgency, as he reached out into the cold silence, hoping someone could help them figure out what this bear was trying to say. Miles away on the research vessel Arctic Explorer, Dr. Lena Morgan and her team of scientists perked up as the radio transmission came through. "This could be important," she murmured, adjusting her glasses. They quickly responded to the call, curiosity sparked by the mention of a polar bear acting strangely. What could be going on with it? "A polar bear behaving unusually," Dr. Morgan said thoughtfully. Her team, made up of animal behavior experts and Arctic specialists, gathered around, tossing around ideas. "Might be stress-related," one of the younger researchers suggested, eyes full of both interest and concern. "Or maybe it ran into something strange in its environment." Back on the Amberjack, Captain Reynolds told his crew to get ready for the arrival of the scientists. They cleared the deck and reviewed all safety procedures. While the crew was used to the sea's unpredictability, this situation was different. There was a quiet buzz of excitement and nerves in the air. Everyone moved with purpose, getting things in place. One deckhand glanced at the others. "What do you think that bear's trying to do?" he asked. Another, adjusting his cap, shook his head. "I've never seen anything like this in all my time out here." Captain Reynolds stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the cold horizon. He was waiting for the Arctic Explorer, and with it, maybe a few answers. With urgency, he shared their exact Arctic coordinates over the radio. "We're at 74 degrees, 35 minutes north, 58 degrees, 40 minutes west," he announced. His voice was steady, but the pressure was clear. Each number he spoke was meant to guide help straight to their position. Aboard the Arctic Explorer, Dr. Morgan asked over the radio, her voice sharp and direct. "Can you describe the bear's condition? Any visible injuries? Signs of distress?" Her questions came quickly, driven by concern and a deep desire to understand what was happening. "Its fur looks clean and healthy." "No visible injuries," Captain Reynolds responded carefully. "But its behavior is very strange. It keeps standing up, roaring and clawing at the ship," he added, hoping the details he shared might help the scientists make sense of it all. As the gap between the two ships narrowed, the Arctic Explorer drew steadily closer to the Amberjack. Dr. Morgan and her team began preparing their gear, ready for whatever they might find. Their thoughts were locked on the mystery ahead, determined to understand what the bear was trying to tell them. Meanwhile, aboard the Amberjack, the crew moved quickly, finishing their final preparations to welcome the approaching scientists. There was a hum of motion on deck, the kind that comes just before something big is about to happen. They carefully double-checked all their equipment, making sure everything was in working order. The crew cleared plenty of space for the research team to work and exchanged curious, uncertain glances. "Maybe they'll finally figure out what this bear wants," one deckhand murmured, as the same quiet anticipation hung in the air, thick like the cold Arctic mist around them. The Arctic Explorer pulled up alongside the Amberjack, and Dr. Morgan, along with her team of scientists, came aboard. They brought a variety of specialized gear with them, cameras, binoculars, notebooks, ready to document and study the polar bear's strange behavior. The crew of the Amberjack watched them with a mix of curiosity and respect as the scientists got right to work. As the team moved to the edge of the ship, they spotted the bear for the first time. It was pacing on a piece of floating ice nearby, its bright white fur standing out sharply against the deep blue water. The scientists didn't speak at first, just observed, taking in the bear's body language and the focused, restless look in its eyes. Staying at a safe distance, the team began their formal observation. Dr. Morgan raised her binoculars, closely watching the bear's posture and eye contact. "Pay attention to the way it holds itself and how it looks at us," she said quietly to her team. They all took notes, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The bear's movements were strange, but intentional, almost like it was trying to say something. But what? Then the bear did something new. It started jumping into the water and climbing back onto the ice again, over and over. The scientists and crew looked on, confused. Is it playing? Or is it upset? Maybe something else entirely, one researcher wondered aloud. Whatever it was doing, this odd back and forth only deepened the mystery. With their equipment ready, the scientists began carefully tracking every move. Dr. Morgan filmed the bear using a video camera, capturing the entire sequence, while the others kept jotting down notes and quietly exchanging ideas. Every motion could mean something, Dr. Morgan reminded them, urging everyone to be thorough. We need to observe as much as we can. They stood in a loose half-circle on the deck, actively discussing theories about what the bear's behavior could mean. Could it be marking its territory? Dr. Morgan asked. Or maybe reacting to a change in its environment? They debated possibilities from stress to instinctual changes, but none of the ideas fully explained what they were seeing. Then someone noticed something. The bear kept making the same gestures in the same direction, toward a certain point on the sea. "It keeps looking that way," said a younger scientist, pointing toward the horizon. That repeated motion sparked a new thought among the group. What if the bear wasn't just acting out, but trying to guide them toward something? The team leaned into this possibility, watching more carefully than ever. "Track how often it does that, and which direction it's facing each time," Dr. Morgan instructed. Her eyes stayed locked on the bear. They began charting every repetition, hoping a pattern would emerge. Every movement, every sound the bear made was now being watched with intense focus. Something was being communicated. They just hadn't cracked the code yet. The team began discussing everything: the way the bear roared, the direction of her gaze, even the pattern of her pacing. "Every move must mean something," Dr. Morgan said, half to herself. The crew listened closely, drawn in by the idea that this bear's behavior might be more than just strange. It might be trying to tell them something important. Even with all their attention and effort, the bear's repeated actions remained hard to explain. She clearly followed some kind of routine, but the reason behind it was still unclear. "We're missing something," Dr. Morgan admitted, a note of frustration slipping through. The crew and scientists were united now, all trying to figure out what the bear was so determined to show them. Then, through their binoculars, the scientists made a key observation: the bear was female. "This could be mother-related behavior," Dr. Morgan said, adjusting her lens to get a clearer look. If the bear was a mother, her actions might be driven by instinct. That changed the way they saw everything and opened up new possibilities. The conversation shifted, growing heavier as the team considered something heartbreaking. "What if she lost her cubs?" one of the researchers asked quietly. The words hung in the cold air, sinking in slowly. If grief or panic was behind her strange actions, it added a whole new layer of emotion to what they were witnessing. Gathered around a map, the scientists started discussing how maternal instincts might shape the bear's behavior. "If she's a mother, this might be protective," one scientist offered, "or maybe she's asking for help." The idea that they were watching a mother's instinct in real time gave new depth to their analysis. Still, even knowing she was likely a mother didn't solve the mystery. The exact reason for her distress was still out of reach. The scientists kept observing her carefully, now interpreting her actions with a mother's urgency in mind, but they were no closer to a clear answer. The bear remained a puzzle, one they hadn't solved yet. Moved by the scientists' insights, Captain Reynolds made a firm decision. "Let's follow her," he said, gripping the ship's wheel. Slowly, the amberjack turned, lining up with the direction the bear had been pointing to all along. It marked a turning point, one where they chose to trust her lead and see where it might take them. With Captain Reynolds guiding the ship, the amberjack cut through the icy waters, heading in the direction the bear seemed to want them to go. A quiet tension settled over the crew. They exchanged glances, each silently wondering what they might discover by following this new, uncertain path. "She's trying to show us something," one deckhand said, eyes fixed on the distant horizon. His voice was soft but full of belief. It wasn't normal for seasoned sailors to follow a wild animal through unknown waters, but somehow it felt right, like it was the only thing to do. The amberjack moved into less familiar parts of the Arctic, led only by the bear's quiet persistence. Something about the sea around them felt different, colder, quieter, like it was holding something back. Captain Reynolds stayed alert, knowing they weren't just crossing ice and water. They were deep in the middle of something they didn't fully understand. The bear didn't stop. She swam forward with steady, determined movements, always looking ahead. Every so often she turned her head back, checking that the ship was still behind her, as if making sure they were still coming. Her presence remained strong and mysterious against the wide, frozen stretch of the Arctic. As the day went on, the team began to quietly consider a heartbreaking theory. "What if her cubs didn't make it?" one scientist whispered, his voice heavy with emotion. The idea was only a guess, but it struck a chord. The thought of a mother bear searching for what she'd lost weighed heavily on everyone. Though it hadn't been confirmed, the theory made sense, and both the crew and scientists couldn't shake the feeling that it might be true. As the amberjack drew closer to a certain part of the ice field, the bear's behavior suddenly shifted. She grew noticeably more agitated, pacing faster, roaring louder, and more often. Everyone on board took notice. Her change in behavior felt urgent, like something important was just ahead. She seemed to be reacting to a place that meant something to her. The scientists noted the difference. Her movements were more focused now, like she was leading them to a specific spot with purpose. It was clear to everyone watching that the bear's urgency had increased. Her behavior wasn't random anymore. She had a goal, and it felt like they were almost there. The tension on the amberjack grew, but so did the sense that they were close to understanding what she'd been trying to tell them all along. The ship's crew, following the bear's lead, could feel it. Something big was coming. Every movement forward felt like a step toward solving the puzzle. A quiet energy ran through the ship. Everyone was on edge, but not from fear. It was the feeling of being moments away from discovery. All eyes were on the horizon. People hardly spoke. There was a charge in the air, like they were about to finally understand the meaning behind the bear's strange and emotional journey. Her movements carried a weight now, a mix of urgency and something like desperation. The closer they got, the more the bear's energy shifted. She seemed less patient, more determined. It was clear to the scientists and crew, something was out there, and it mattered. They braced themselves, unsure of what they would find, but certain it would be important. Inside the amberjack's cabin, the team gathered around maps and data, carefully connecting all the dots. Dr. Morgan led the effort, lining up the bear's behaviors with the locations they had marked. Crew members added their observations, each detail helping to build a clearer picture. Out on the deck, the group's attention turned to one key thing. The bear kept looking in the same direction, again and again. She pointed, turned, and repeated the gesture. "It's like she's trying to show us exactly where to look," one scientist noted, watching the bear's steady focus. That repeated gesture gave them a new clue. The spot she was pointing to was far beyond where polar bears usually roam. "Why would she bring us out here?" Captain Reynolds asked, scanning the unfamiliar terrain. The location felt different, remote, unexplored, and completely off the usual map. As they pushed into this strange, isolated area, a feeling of teamwork took over the ship. Sailors and scientists shared what they knew, asked questions, and built ideas together. They were all driven by the same purpose now, to follow this bear's lead and figure out what she was trying to reveal. And with every mile, that feeling grew. The team believed they were close. Each roar, each gesture, felt like another step toward a deeper truth. Something hidden out here in the ice, something only this bear could show them. The air was filled with excitement and curiosity as the last pieces of the puzzle finally started falling into place. During one of their discussions, the ship's climatologist spoke up with a key insight. "Recent ice drift patterns might explain this," he said. His theory was simple but powerful. The bear's cubs had likely ended up stranded on a drifting chunk of ice, separated from solid ground. In light of recent environmental shifts, this made sense, and it helped explain the mother bear's desperate behavior and why she had led them here so urgently. The team now considered what the bear must have been feeling, desperate to reach her young, who were possibly trapped and drifting farther away. It lined up with everything they had seen, her determination, her urgency, and her refusal to give up. "She's trying to get help," Dr. Morgan said quietly, as the realization sank in across the group. The idea that a wild animal had turned to humans in such a critical moment was both moving and extraordinary. As the amberjack neared the spot the bear had been pointing to, the energy on board shifted. Everyone was on high alert. Crew and scientists alike stood at the edge of the deck, binoculars raised, scanning the icy distance. If the mother bear had truly led them to her cubs, they might be just moments away from understanding her actions and possibly even helping. Suddenly, a shout came from the lookout. "Movement on the ice," he called. All eyes turned as binoculars zoomed in on a drifting slab in the distance. There, small, barely visible, something was moving. Hope lit up the faces of everyone on deck. Could it really be her cubs? The team focused their binoculars again. Slowly, their eyes widened in quiet shock and joy. There, on the floating slab, were two small polar bear cubs. They were clearly stranded, but alive. The ice drift theory had been right. Everything the mother bear had done now made perfect sense. She'd been leading them to save her babies. The team didn't waste a second. Crew and scientists came together, talking quickly and forming a plan. Time was critical, and they all knew it. Dr. Morgan took charge, coordinating between the groups. "We need to move fast, but carefully," she said firmly. The rescue would require both the ship's resources and everyone's expertise. Then Captain Reynolds spoke up with a solution. "Let's use the raft the mother climbed on," he suggested. It made perfect sense. It would let her stay close and reassure her cubs during the rescue. The raft was carefully lowered and positioned. The mother bear stepped onto it again without hesitation, her eyes locked on the distant slab, filled with hope and worry. The amberjack and Arctic explorer worked together, moving slowly and precisely across the icy waters. The rescue had to be handled with care. Getting too close too fast could break the ice holding the cubs. Everyone moved with intense focus, fully aware of the risk and the mother bear's trust. As they neared the drifting ice, the rescue team was deployed. With calm and steady hands, they reached the cubs. Though the little bears were scared, they were unharmed. One by one, the team gently secured the cubs onto the raft. When the mother bear saw her young safe, she let out a sound that was half roar, half relieved exhale, a moment none of them would forget. Back on the raft, the polar bear family was finally together. The mother nudged her cubs gently, checking them over, her body relaxing for the first time in what must have been days. Her eyes softened. Around them, the crew and scientists stood still, watching in quiet awe. They had not only confirmed the ice drift theory, they had helped save a family. Now, with the rescue complete, they began to prepare to guide the bears safely back towards solid pack ice, where they belonged. Thank you for watching this incredible story of instinct, trust, and teamwork in the heart of the Arctic.